Please excuse any mispronunciations by TTS. The English TTS has trouble with non-English words. But, if you watch Zentraya, you should be fine. As a result of YouTube's rules pertaining to links in descriptions, I will be adding site details to the video. Article by Rolling Stone, credit to Michelle Thompson, for the illustrations, used in original article. The 250 Greatest Guitarists of All Time. Celebrating six-string glory in blues, rock, metal, punk, folk, country, reggae, jazz, flamenco, bossa nova, and much more. My guitar is not a thing, Joan Jett once said. It is an extension of myself. It is who I am. The guitar is the most universal instrument, the most primal, and the most expressive. Anybody can pick up a little guitar in no time at all, but you can spend a lifetime exploring its possibilities. That's why thinking about what makes a great guitarist is so much fun. Rolling Stone published its original list of the 100 greatest guitarists in 2011. It was compiled by a panel of musicians, mostly older classic rockers. Our new expanded list was made by the editors and writers of Rolling Stone. This one goes to 250. Guitar players are often as iconic as the lead singers for the bands they play in. But mythic guitar gods like Jimmy Page, Brian May, and Eddie Van Halen are only one part of the story. We wanted to show the scope of the guitar's evolution. The earliest entrant on the list, folk music icon Elizabeth Cotten, was born in 1893, the youngest, indie rock prodigy Lindsey Jordan, was born in 1999. The list has rock, jazz, reggae, country, folk, blues, punk, metal, disco, funk, bossa nova, bachata, Congolese rumba, flamenco, and much more. There are peerless virtuosos like Pat Metheny, Yvette Young, and Steve Vai, as well as primitivists like Johnny Ramone, and Poison Ivy of the Cramps. There are huge stars like Prince, Joni Mitchell, and Neil Young, and behind-the-scenes masters like Memphis Soul great Teenie Hodges and smooth rock assassin Larry Carlton. Many great guitarists realized their genius as part of a duo, so Kim and Kelly Deal of the Breeders, Adrian Smith, and Dave Murray of Iron Maiden, and other symbiotic pairs share an entry. Our only instrumental criteria is that you had to be a six-string player. In making the list, we tended to value heaviness over tastiness, feel over polish, invention over refinement, risk-takers and originators more than technicians. We also tended to give an edge to artists who channeled whatever gifts God gave them into great songs and game-changing albums, not just impressive playing. As modern blues visionary Gary Clark Jr. put it, I don't know if I want to get too far off the path, I don't want to get lost in the forest, but I like to wander out a bit and adventure.
216 Steve Hackett. Genesis were a largely unknown art rock band, before guitarist Steve Hackett was hired in 1971, replacing founding member Anthony Phillips. Hackett made an immediate impact when he introduced them to his two-hand tapping technique, which they captured on 1971's Nursery Crime, years before Eddie Van Halen introduced it to a larger audience. A couple of years later, he laid down an epic, soaring guitar solo on their masterpiece, Firth of Fifth, one of the most beautiful pieces of music ever to appear on a progressive rock album. He left the group in 1977 to pursue a solo career that continues to this day. I'm very happy to have freed up guitarists to play dazzling solos, Hackett said, and come up with things that would only be dreamt up at one time. Key tracks: Horizons, Firth of Fifth. 215 Kurt Weill. Comes across like an easy breezy slacker dude, but he's a serious guitarist, and his style, which combines chilled-out drones and intricate yet melodic solos, is rooted in part in his getting a banjo from his parents as a teen, after he'd asked for a guitar. Banjos are in an open tuning, and they've got that high drone string, the Philadelphian told Guitar.com in 2018. It's not like you'd even think about that when you're playing as a kid, but I came to really like that ethereal drone. Over the course of his career, he's incorporated influences from all over music's map, synthesizing them into his bed-headed style that's gently, subtly virtuosic. Key tracks: Pretty Pimpin', Wakin' on a Pretty Day. 214 kg Hano. Japanese musician, KG Hayno's freeform, solo performances are squealing, noisy exercises in catharsis, where it's not clear whether he's playing, or actually performing an exorcism on his guitar, and in ensemble settings like the late 90s group IEO, whose self-titled debut is beautifully ragged, and deeply emotive. He soothes with soft, shimmering chords one moment, and shreds his listeners' eardrums, with squalls of fuzz the next. People practice really hard because they want people to check them out, he told Vice Japan. And then they say it's improvisation. That drives me nuts. Key tracks. A shredded coiled cable, within this cable sincerity, could not be contained, why in the courtesy, of the prey, always confused with the courtesy of the hunters PT1. 213 Lucy Dacus. For Lucy Dacus, the guitar is as essential an instrument as her voice, even if her playing doesn't get as much attention, as her piercing lyrical insights. From her pulsing rhythm part, on 2016 standout, I Don't Wanna Be Funny Anymore, to her contributions in Supergroup Boy Genius, Dacus arrangements are an understated, but key part of her gifts. Live performances of her 2018 fan favorite, Night Shift begin quietly, with Dacus strumming alone. Her longtime lead guitarist, Jacob Blizzard brings the distorted noise as the song goes on, but she stays locked in beside him, through each of the song's movements, never letting up. By the time it all comes to a crashing, cathartic close, Dacus has declared a final goodbye to an old lover, and it's clear that she means it. Key tracks: Night Shift, I Don't Wanna Be Funny Anymore. 212 Jose Feliciano. Thinking of Jose Feliciano solely, as the guy who belts out, Feliz Navidad, during the holiday season would be spectacularly unfair. Born blind, Feliciano became an acoustic guitar virtuoso in his teens. Alternately lyrical, and ferocious, his playing is imbued in the boleros, and folk songs of his Puerto Rican heritage. His ragged mosaic of styles, rock, jazz, soul, bossa nova, changed the sound of mainstream pop rock, in the 60s. Feliciano's radical 1968 reinvention, of the Mamas, and the Papas, California Dreamin', found him vocalizing in Spanish like a salsa sonoro, and the guitar pyrotechnics of his, Light My Fire, took the Doors classic into darker, cinematic territory. Key tracks: Light My Fire, Here, There and Everywhere. 211 Nick Zinner. When New York City's garage rock trio, Yeah Yeah Yeahs formed in 2000, their aim was to create something trashy, punky, grimy. Nick Zinner's style is all that, and more, fusing the dance punk of ESG, the panache of Van Halen, the violence of Roland S. Howard, and the grandeur of Johnny Marr, into his signature catchy, glittering riffs. Zinner's guitar work is minimal, but holds cosmic emotion, from the longing of maps, to the monstrous tension of Heads Will Roll. Key tracks: Y Control, Maps, Gold Lion. 210 Keiki King. A tireless sonic adventurer, Keiki King takes a Preston Reed meets John Cage approach to the acoustic guitar, experimenting with alternate tunings, treated instruments, and electronic loops, while utilizing fingerstyle, two-handed tapping, and percussive slapping techniques. I'll think, let's see what happens if I lower this string here, and raise that one there, she told Premier Guitar in 2011. When you tune your guitar differently, all of a sudden your fingers, and your mind have to be creative again, because you're not relying on shapes, and places that sound good, or feel familiar. You have to explore the fretboard to find new fingerings and sounds, and that leads to new discoveries. Key tracks: Playing with Pink Noise, Skimming the Fractured Surface, To a Place of Endless Light. 209 Gary Clark Jr. initially pigeonholed as an heir, to the crown of Jimi Hendrix, or Stevie Ray Vaughan, Grammy-winning blues rock guitarist, Gary Clark Jr. has consistently demonstrated a much broader reach in his fiery playing, incorporating elements of soul, funk, grunge, and hip-hop into his records, and collaborating with the disparate likes of Foo Fighters, Alicia Keys, Tech Nine, and Bun B. I don't think that I'm reaching my full potential, if I just do what people expect of me, he told Rolling Stone in 2014. I love to play, and I love to experiment, and there are a lot more roads to explore. I don't know if I want to get too far off the path, I don't want to get lost in the forest, but I like to wander out a bit and adventure. Key tracks: This Land, Grinder 208 Amadou Bagayoko. The Malian couple Amadou Bagayoko and Mariam Doumbia, who met at an institute for the blind in 1977, broke big performing and recording as Amadou and Mariam, when their brightly melodic duets, led rhythmically by Amadou's jaunty, occasionally skronky leads, crossed over to the rock festival circuit. It makes sense, though. People are often surprised when we explain how much we were influenced by Western pop music, Amadou Bagayoko once told an interviewer with a laugh. I grew up listening to records by Rod Stewart, Led Zeppelin, James Brown, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, Pink Floyd, Stevie Wonder. That's because they were the only records we had in Mali. Key tracks Janfa, Cen Pa Bone 207 Justin Broderick. Justin Broderick has created his own guitar lexicon between industrial metal crushers Godflesh, grindcore pioneers Napalm Death, and the psychedelic post-metal band Yezu, among countless other projects. His steamrolling, elastic riffs, and spongy textures, in Godflesh breathed rare humanity to the band's mechanical rhythms. In Napalm Death, he helped pioneer the grinding sound of grindcore, hyperfast death metal, by turning up his distortion so high, you felt the pulse more than the notes on songs like Instinct of Survival. And in Yezu, his psychedelic post-metal guys, he layered miasmas of noise until they created a beautiful shadow world in which his voice echoed. On everything he does, his guitar sighs, groans, and weeps, but nothing else sounds like it. Key tracks: Like Rats, Silver, Scum 206 Hugh McCracken. East Coast guitarist Hugh McCracken was never a showy soloist, but left his tasteful mark on countless classics. That's his piercing lead on Steely Dan's Hey 19, his sprinting opening lick on Van Morrison's Brown Eyed Girl, and his silky acoustic throughout Roberta Flack's Killing Me Softly with his song. In an unobtrusive but vital way, he also enriched Paul Simon's 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, Alicia Keys' If I Ain't Got You, and John Lennon and Yoko Ono's I'm Losing You. McCracken was so busy, and so content with studio work, that he turned down Paul McCartney's offer to join Wings after playing on Ram. Key tracks: Hey 19, Killing Me Softly with his song 205 Eric Johnson. A consummate technician, Austin-born, Eric Johnson, is the sort of player whose abilities are more appreciated by his peers than by the public at large. "Eric's so good it's ridiculous," raved Steve Morse, while Stevie Ray Vaughan deemed him one of my favorite guitarists. "Damn, that guy can play," was Billy Gibbons' assessment. A fusion stylist whose approach leaned more rock than jazz, he was a rising star on the mid-70s Austin scene, but lost career momentum after being sidelined in a contractual dispute. Although his 1990 instrumental album, Avia Musicom, eventually went platinum, he's mostly known for guitar-centric collaborations such as G3, with Joe Satriani, and Steve Vai, and Eclectic, with Miles Davis guitarist Mike Stern. Key tracks: Cliffs of Dover, Benny Mann's Blues 204 Lynn Tate. Lynn Tate was born in Trinidad, but made his mark in Jamaica, basically creating the guitar sound of rocksteady music, through his playing on the earliest recordings, in that style, such as Hopton Lewis, Take It Easy, and Derek Morgan's Tougher Than Tough. When the king of Jamaican guitar, Ernest Ranglin, left to work in England in 1964, Tate became the top session man on the island. His work on Desmond Decker's 007 Shanty Town is some of the most recognizable guitar in Jamaican music history, and though he was active in the scene for just a few years, leaving for Canada in 1968, his influence and importance were cemented when his student, Hux Brown, honed Tate's playing style to help create the sound of reggae guitar. Key tracks: 007 Shanty Town, Take It Easy 203 Grant Green. Grant Green came out of the hard bop scene to become a soul jazz pioneer. A Charlie Parker fanatic from St. Louis, he cut his Blue Note debut in 1960, and went on to a stellar 5-year run, with the impeccably cool grooves of Idle Moments, and the complete quartets with Sonny Clark. He explored Latin jazz in his 1964 Matador, with Elvin Jones and McCoy Tyner. Green died in 1979, only 43, while in New York for a gig at George Benson's Breezin' Lounge. But his influence still thrives, especially in hip-hop. His guitar has been sampled on rap classics from A Tribe Called Quest's The Low End Theory to Kendrick Lamar's Good Kid, Mad City. Key tracks: Idle Moments, Jean DeFleur, On Green Dolphin Street. (202) Vince Gill. It's almost unfair, as a pure vocalist, Vince Gill is rightly celebrated as one of country music's all-time greats. But what's more, the man is lethal with an electrified Fender in his hands. In addition to the lively chicken picking and twangy bends on singles like 1991's Liza Jane, Gill has paid homage to the California country guitar gods like Don Rich and Roy Nichols on 2013's Bakersfield. What's more, Gill has brought his guitar to sessions for countless other artists' albums, like Miranda Lambert, Emmylou Harris, Patti Loveless, Kenny Chesney, Dolly Parton, and Don Henley. Speaking of Henley, Gill's been a touring member of the Eagles since Glenn Frey's death in 2017, pulling double duty as a harmony vocalist and guitar slinger extraordinaire. Key tracks: Liza Jane, Oklahoma Borderline. 201 Gary Diaper Man Shitter. When asked why he performed on stage wearing little more than an oversized diaper, Parliament, Funkadelic guitarist Gary Shitter replied, "God loves babies and fools. I'm both." Although originally celebrated for putting the delic in Funkadelic through searing, distortion-fattened leads on jams like Cosmic Slop, Shitter was also a master rhythm guitarist, as evinced by his insistently funky playing on One Nation Under a Groove and Atomic Dog, both of which he co-wrote. In addition to playing Diaper Man in Parliament, Funkadelic, he was called Starchild in Bootsy's Rubber Band, and served as music director for the P-Funk All-Stars, while his post-P-Funk career included collaborations with both Paul Schaefer and the Black Crowes. Key tracks: Cosmic Slop, One Nation Under a Groove. 200 Creastone, Kingfish, Ingram. Creastone, Kingfish, Ingram grew up in Clarksdale, Mississippi, right near Robert Johnson's Crossroads, and describes himself as an old soul, which may be an understatement. At 24, he seems to have absorbed the entirety of the blues guitar canon and beyond, thanks to influences that also include Prince. But his playing evinces not just a startling fluency, seamlessly integrating an entire century's worth of licks, but also a freshness that can make it feel like you're hearing a searing blues solo for the first time. He's a rare 21st-century guitar hero, and the undisputed future of the blues. Key tracks: Midnight Heat Live, Outside of This Town. 199 Bombino. Omar Mokhtar, better known as Bombino, is a Tuareg musician from Niger, who specializes in what many have termed desert blues, a classification that includes other Saharan artists like Tinwaran and Songhoy blues. Influenced by Jimi Hendrix and Mark Knopfler, Bombino's playing exhibits aspects of both, from naughty fingerstyle progressions to explosive, psychedelic soloing, that remains rooted in the melodies and rhythms of Northern Africa. Bombino's music also has a political message. He's part of a nomadic people who've been marginalized and caught in a brutal cycle of violence and rebellion. Bombino's own form of rebellion has been to let his guitar be the weapon. "I never saw the need to take up arms for the rebel cause," he said. "I always believed that there was a path out through music." Key tracks: As a Main Tiliad, Tenera, The Desert, My Home. 198 Jerry Reed. A rockabilly teen sensation, who spent time in an orphanage as a child, Jerry Reed first made his bones as a songwriter. Gene Vincent covered his Crazy Legs when Reed was 20. He then cut his teeth as a session guitarist, his sprightly sound coloring sides for everyone from Waylon Jennings to Joan Baez. But it was the 1967 hit, Guitar Man, soon covered by Elvis Presley, that codified his identity. The strummy, plucky solo almost veers into funk, Cajun, and soul, a style he would refine over the years on songs such as Amos Moses, and one that perfectly illustrated the song's lyric about an itinerant musician with a unique vibe. Key tracks: Guitar Man, Amos Moses. 197 Nuno Betancourt. A dazzling pyrotechnician, with an innate knowledge of how to fit complex riffs into a song's melody, Nuno Betancourt made his name as a guitarist with the funk metal band Extreme. His fluid, casually virtuosic solos on songs like The Brash, Get the Funk Out, and the chart-topping ballad, More Than Words, made him a formidable foil for the band's theatrical frontman, Gary Cherone. His innate knowledge of what makes a pop song work led him to get tapped by artists like Janet Jackson and Robert Palmer in the 90s, and in 2009 he began working with Rihanna, a relationship that has allowed him to show off his stylistic diversity and appear on stage at the Super Bowl halftime show. Key tracks: Midnight Express, Kiss It Better. 196 James Taylor. Evolved the sounds of the 60s folk revival into something sleek enough for the 70s, and a key part of that evolution was his singular acoustic guitar style. The constantly in-motion accompaniment you hear on a song like Country Road is as recognizable as his voice. Folk fingerpickers usually use their thumbs to play rhythmic bass patterns on the guitar's bottom strings, but Taylor broke free of the patterns in favor of a freer, more pianistic approach. At the same time, he drew on hymns, show tunes, and jazz for his sophisticated chords and unique voicings. Key tracks: Something in the Way She Moves, The Frozen Man, Fire and Rain. 195 Greg Ginn. Henry Rollins is the most famous member of Black Flag's rotating cast, but the founder, heart, and soul of the legendary LA punk crew is Greg Ginn, whose jagged combination of psychedelic blues rock, jazz abstraction, and hardcore defining speed, redefined rock guitar for generations to come. Via his iconic, plexiglass Dan Armstrong guitar, Ginn combined Black Sabbath's sludge and the Grateful Dead's spaciness to create screwy solos that could go anywhere, while his frantic chug powered the band's sweaty, violent excesses. As Rollins himself put it, Black Flag had at least one ingredient they only made one of, and that's Greg Ginn. That's the big deal with that band. Key tracks: Damaged 2, Revenge. 194 Brian Robertson and Scott Gorham. The key to Thin Lizzy's soaring 70s hard rock was singer-bassist Phil Lynot's songwriter, which combined early rock, Celtic folk, and Motown into a unique style that was by turns guttural and anthemic. But Thin Lizzy really took flight when Brian Robertson and Scott Gorham joined in 1974, creating a telepathically locked-in, twin guitar assault that influenced a generation of metal acts, from Judas Priest and Iron Maiden to Metallica. Given how much heavier metal became, it can be hard for contemporary ears to hear how tough songs like Jailbreak or Bad Reputation sounded at the time, so check out the extra crunch of their BBC Sessions tracks, which have been included with various reissues over the years. Key tracks: The Boys Are Back in Town, Emerald. 193 David Lindley. Backing a troubadour can't be easy for a lead guitarist, who has to provide a compatible accompaniment, without ever distracting from the singer and the song. Again and again, David Lindley, the stringed instrument wizard who was on call during the heyday of SoCal rock, was able to do just that, while still making his presence known. Just listen to his slide guitar on Jackson Browne's Running on Empty and Redneck Friend, his rippling lead on Brown's Fountain of Sorrow, or his tender slack key solo on the Dolly Parton, Linda Ronstadt, Emmylou Harris version of To Know Him Is to Love Him. As heard on his rumbly version of Mercury Blues, he could also rip it on his own records. Key tracks: Running on Empty and Redneck Friend, Jackson Browne, Mercury Blues. 192 Lita Ford. I was pretty oblivious to that fact that I didn't have a penis between my legs, Lita Ford told Rolling Stone. All I knew is that I had fingers, and the lust for rock and roll. Ford was among the most technically gifted soloists in 80s hair metal, with a rich tone she could manipulate on her soaring anthems like 1988's Kiss Me Deadly. As a teenager, Ford hung out with guitar gods twice her age on the Sunset Strip, like Ritchie Blackmore, who turned her on to using a home plate-shaped pick to achieve the snaking solos she'd become known for. Her other idol, Tony Iommi, proposed to her when she was still the lead guitarist of the Runaways. Despite allegations of abuse by the Sabbath legend, it was ultimately Ford who taught IMI how to play his own riffs when he came out of drug addiction. Key tracks: Black Widow, Lisa, Hellbound Train. 191 Chalmers Edward Spanky Alford. One riff shifted the course of turn-of-the-century R&B. When Chalmers Edward, Spanky, Alford, brought the longing cry of his guitar, to D'Angelo's 2000 Panty, and Boxer Brief Dropper, untitled, How Does It Feel, it helped move black pop from beat-based hip-hop, soul, to instrument-rich, neo-soul. Alford, who also played on such slow jams as Raphael Saadiq's Ask of You, Total's Kissing You and Mary J. Blige's I Found My Everything, got his start in the gospel world, working with the East St. Louis Gospelettes, and the Mighty Clouds of Joy. His work shows how gospel is still musically relevant to new iterations of soul. Alford died from diabetes complications in 2008 at age 52. Key tracks: Untitled, How Does It Feel, Ask of You, Kissing You. 190 Lightnin' Hopkins. Born in 1912, Samuel John Hopkins was a 32-year-old alumni of the Texas penal system, before adopting the sobriquet Lightnin' and beginning a recording career that would see him become one of the blues' most prolific and revered artists. A master of self-accompaniment, whose emphatic fills and riffs could shuffle, mosey, or boogie on command, he created much of the blues vernacular that still informs the genre to this day. Hopkins benefited from the blues revival of the 1960s, but one of the spoken word intros, on 1968's Freeform Patterns, recorded with the rhythm section of Austin Psych Rockers, the 13th Floor Elevators, shows how hard his road to the spotlight had been. I've been mistreated. I've been stepped on, walked on, kicked on, picked up, and put in jail. Lord have mercy. Key tracks: Little Whale, What Did I Say, Little Sisters Boogie. 189 Jerry Cantrell was raised on classic rock, country, and heavy metal, and somehow blended those styles into a uniquely devastating guitar style that alternates between steamrolling, gut check riffs, and cutting, bluesy leads. He plays the talk box riff for Alice in Chains, Man the Box, with weighty force, and designed the skull-rattling, 7/8 riff on Them Bones, which opens the band's masterpiece Dirt. He's kept that pace throughout his career, playing ruinous riffs on his solo, Psychotic Break and Alice in Chains, Check My Brain. Even when he lightens up, such as on the acoustic, No Excuses, he still plays in a way that adds clouds for every silver lining. He's a master of the moody, the dark lord of grunge. Key tracks: Man in the Box, We Die Young, No Excuses. 188 Marnie Stern turned heads in the 2000s with her hyperactive approach to the finger-tapping technique, like an indie prog, math rock version of Eddie Van Halen. She took her inspiration from indie bands like Sleater Kinney and Don Calabero, with her own sense of hammer-on bombardment, as a metaphor for emotional overload. As she said, the idea of potential and possibility is the only thing that drives me to keep going with music. Stern spent years playing in the house band for Late Night with Seth Meyers, but she has made a strong return with her new album, The Comeback Kid. Key tracks: Vibrational Match, Shea Stadium, Female Guitar Players Are the New Black. 187 Mark Ribot. Some session players are prized for their ability to blend in unobtrusively. Then there's Mark Ribot, who's beloved for the exact opposite, a searing tone, and spare but kinetic attack that floated like smoke. Here was a player could take a gnomic musical request from Tom Waits, and deliver something both shapely and unearthly. I remember one verbal instruction being, play it like a midget's bar mitzvah. Ribot would recall of the sessions for 1985's Rain Dogs. He's just as delectable up front. Mark Ribot y Los Cubanos Postizos still cultivates an arresting late-night groove, especially on their 1998 debut, The Prosthetic Cubans, where the leader seethes and squalls through the rumba band leader, Arsenio Rodriguez's teeming songbook. Key tracks: Jockey Full of Bourbon, Aurora and Pecan. 186 Steve Lukather. No guitarist summed up the sound of early 80s LA better than Steve Lukather. A founding member of Toto, he was one of the city's most sought-after session guitarists, thanks both to his flawless technique and a stylistic agility that found him equally at home with sophisti funk rhythm licks and screaming, arena rock leads. He played on 3 straight years of Grammy Album of the Year nominees, Quincy Jones' The Dude in 1982, Toto 4 in 1983, and Michael Jackson's Thriller in 1984, the second and third one. "It was happening big time back then," he said. "The last great era of the session guy scene." Lukather is the only member of Toto to have remained through every breakup and reunion. Key tracks hold the line. Razamataz 185. Peggy Jones is known as the Queen Mother of Guitar, and for good reason. The Harlem-born musician recorded and performed with none other than Bo Diddley early in her career, earning her another nickname, Lady Bo. Also trained in opera and dance, Jones brought a technician's ear to her blues playing, as heard on the track, Aztec, a complex instrumental Jones wrote and performed herself, despite the song being credited to Diddley on recorded versions. The kind of jazzy, avant-garde experimentation heard on Aztec informed Jones' solo work with her band The Jewels, with whom she also played a Roland guitar synthesizer, one of many ways she proved herself to be ahead of her time. Key tracks: Aztec, Wiggle Wobble, I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles.